Almost ready, Solana? Georgia, you good too? Kelsey too?
Yep.
Sounds good. We're gonna get started in a quick second, in like a minute or so. I'll just do a quick intro real quick. All right, it's 3 o'clock. Let's quickly get started over here so we can give our speakers some time. But hello, my name is Takuro Ishihara. Welcome to Thursday Gathering here in Tokyo. This is our 128th Thursday Gathering. We welcome you, and know it's a little bit earlier than expected. We have a 3 p.m. start today, so I think people will start coming in soon. But before we get started with our session, just quickly, for those of you who might not really be used to Zoom, we are using this Zoom platform to bring you our event. And with that said, there's a couple ways to watch. There's a gallery view and a speaker view. So if you want to look at the speaker who's talking, I would recommend using the speaker view. You can toggle that on your top right side if you're on a PC or desktop. The community view, if you want to watch it with everyone in the community, I would recommend the gallery view. You can see who else is around. And on top of that, because we will be having presentations, if you could please mute your mics while people are speaking, that will be good, so that we don't overtalk and overspeak our speakers. And finally, I know that a lot of you might have comments or questions throughout. We're trying to make this as interactive as possible. So if you could politely put your questions, comments, etc. on the chat, we'll try to pick those up as much as possible during the event. With that said, without further ado, I'd like to pass it on to our speakers, Solana, Georgia, and Kelsey, who will take on the show. And then I will talk to you guys towards the end. If you guys have some, we do have ample other times to network and stuff like that on the very back end as well, so I can explain that later. But I would like to pass it on to Solana. Solana, take it away.
Thank you, Tak-san. I am going to quickly share my screen. Okay, does everyone see that clearly? Yeah? Okay, great. So as people start to come in, I'm just going to get started with my introduction. So hello, everyone, and welcome to today's session. My name is Solana, and I am the creator of the speaker series, and I'm incredibly excited to be your host and moderator today. So today's session, as you can see, is the student speaker series, the 4th one. And today is about what it takes to be a successful female student entrepreneur. And I'm honored to be collaborating today with the US Embassy. And I'm joined with 2 very special guests. On your screen, you might see that there's another individual with a similar screen background to mine. This is Georgia, and she's our speaker for today. And you'll also see Kelsey. I think she has a US Embassy logo on her background. And before we go into the background of these amazing speakers, I want to delve into kind of an explanation as to why I decided to start the speaker series and to give you a little bit of background, because I think that lays the foundation of today's conversation about what it takes to be a successful student entrepreneur. So some of you might be, wondering, rightfully so, who exactly I am. But I was a summer intern with Venture Cafe Tokyo a couple months ago, and that's where I decided to create the speaker series as a way to empower youth voices in Japan. And while I'm not working with Venture Cafe Tokyo, my main job is actually I'm a student here in Boston at Tufts University. So for some of you, it might be 3 p.m., but for me, it's actually 1 a.m. So before I was with Venture Cafe Tokyo as a student here in Boston, I actually visited Venture Cafe Cambridge with my friends. These were friends who were equally passionate about things like business development and entrepreneurship. And when we went to Venture Cafe Cambridge, I saw a lot of other fellow students, because I think here in the US, it's not uncommon for any college student to know a handful of student entrepreneurs or someone who's in the startup scene. And after talking to different Japanese students and ambassadors at Venture Cafe Tokyo, it allowed me to kind of step foot into the Japanese innovation ecosystem. And I realized it's not as common for Japanese student entrepreneurs to exist. And so I wanted to create a platform that is created by students and for students to create an intentional space for young entrepreneurs to not only just find inspiration, but to also support one another and to learn more about what it means to be a student entrepreneur and why it's advantageous to be in the startup scene as young as we are. And actually, the US Embassy approached Venture Cafe Tokyo, talking about how they have a very similar vision to this, and that's how this amazing session came to be. And I'm really excited about it. If you're interested in learning more about like who I am, what I do, if you want to connect and talk more about the student speaker series, I actually have a QR code right here that you can use, and it connects to my LinkedIn, so you can reach out there. So yeah, and right before I ask Kelsey to take it away, just want to briefly outline today's discussion. So I started my introduction. We're having our two other guest speakers' introductions. We're going to go through three main questions for today. We're going to end it with a Q&A session. So if you want to ask questions, it'll be at the end, and then we'll have some closing remarks. But yeah, that's enough about me. I want to hand it over quickly to Kelsey, who's going to explain to you a little bit more about what the US Embassy is doing and their amazing initiatives and how that ties into today's session. So Kelsey, please take it away.
Thanks so much, Solana. Good afternoon, everyone. Like Solana said, I'm Kelsey De Ronaldez. I'm an Assistant Cultural Affairs Officer here at the US Embassy in Tokyo. And we are so honored to be co-hosting this event with Venture Cafe Tokyo. This week, we celebrate Global Entrepreneurship Week, as well as International Education Week. So in fact, today is even Women's Entrepreneurship Day. So we are thrilled to be able to have this conversation today focused on empowering young and female student entrepreneurs. The US Embassy is engaged on these topics because we recognize that we need a more diverse and gender-balanced workforce, not only in Japan, but worldwide. Research shows that diverse groups outperform more homogeneous groups by accepting differences, interacting more inclusively, and processing information more carefully. Additionally, studies show that equal access to economic opportunities for women leads to more inclusive, sustainable growth. Yet, women remain dramatically underrepresented in the workforce, especially when we look at entrepreneurs. According to the 2019 Global Entrepreneurship Monitor, which surveys entrepreneurial activity in 50 countries, it showed that countries with the highest gender gap were Pakistan, North Macedonia, Japan, Egypt, and Norway. So this means in these countries, women started entrepreneurial activities at half the rate of their male counterparts. In 5 countries, the US, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Madagascar, and Brazil, however, there was a score of equal or higher rates for total entrepreneurial activity between men and women. And the United States, for the first time in years, actually approached parity, with women starting at about 91% of the male rate based on this report. So the situation is improving, but we have a ways to go. So for this reason, the US Embassy is committed to the continued advancement of female professionals in the Japanese workforce and to continued exchanges with their US counterparts, like we have here today. So in addition to the conversations you will have today about the unique challenges and opportunities for young and female entrepreneurs, we hope that Georgia and Solana will also share some more about collaborating with international students or international projects, as well as the importance of studying abroad for aspiring global entrepreneurs. Before I turn it back to them, I'd like to ask a few short polling questions to get a sense of who's in the audience today and what are your thoughts on the topic. So this is our first poll here. As an entrepreneur, do you feel that men and women have equal opportunities? These questions are anonymous, or your answers are anonymous, so we'll give everyone a few moments to participate. Of course, if you're joining us via the YouTube live feed, you may not be able to answer. but good to think about. All right, I'm going to go ahead and end and share this so everyone can take a look. Unfortunately, that is the result I was not hoping for, but I think the reality of this situation, right, is that opportunities aren't equal, and there's something, maybe we can do about it, right? That's why we're here today. So recognition, I think, is the first step. So here's the second question. As a female entrepreneur, what barriers have you experienced in trying to pursue your career in entrepreneurship? You may also not be a female entrepreneur, so understandable, but other things that you might be facing. I'm not sure if Georgia or Solana will touch on some of these, but these are obstacles that we've heard when speaking with entrepreneurs that we work with on a daily basis, that these are challenges that they all face, but maybe in different ways or in different fields, it could be more pronounced, for example. All right, I'll share the results here. So maybe not all female entrepreneurs, so understandable. But yes, definitely lack of role models. And I think that even permeates outside of entrepreneurship fields. I would say that is even the same for, for me as a diplomat. If you don't have people to help you along the way to be your mentors, it's kind of hard to figure out what the end path is and how to get there. All right, and here is our last question. Of course, our main goal is to connect the US and Japan in every way possible. So we're interested to see if this is something that you would be interested in too. All answers are acceptable. All right, a few more seconds. Okay, here are the results. And awesome. We are so glad that people are interested in doing it. Also that you've done it and it's helped. We have a range of resources at the embassy. And again, like I said, it's International Education Week. So we invite you to join us and participate in our program so we can help you get there. All right. So I think with that, we'll close the polling results, polling questions, and I will turn it back over to Solana. Thank you all so much and enjoy today's presentation.
Thank you, Kelsey, for that amazing introduction. I'm actually going to pass it on to Georgia.
Well, thank you, Solana and Kelsey, and the entire team that organized this event for having me here. I'm really honored and happy to be helpful however I can, and think this is a really important topic to dive into. So I'm Georgia Messenger. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I'm based in Los Angeles, California. Supposed to be a junior at Harvard University, studying psychology and computer science. But taking some time off of school to pursue startups and venture capital, which is what I love to do. So I am one of the co-founders of Trill Project, which is an anonymous social network for mental health peer support that you all can download. And essentially, when I was back in high school, a good friend of mine was really struggling coming out as bisexual and struggling with what that meant to her identity and how it was affecting her own emotional well-being. So another friend of mine and I figured, why not use this unique period in time where we don't necessarily have to have traditional jobs to use this computer science education we've been blessed with to try to create something that could actually have meaning in real people's lives. So fast forward nearly 2 years later, and we have grown the community to nearly 80,000 people across 40 countries around the world. And that's all been an entirely female-founded, student-driven startup venture. And after that experience, I've really launched into the world of entrepreneurship. So I also run a business called Girls Get It, which is a virtual, well now virtual coding course for female identifying and non-binary elementary school students, which is a lot of fun to be able to spend some time with 7-year-olds now on Zoom, teaching them to make their first computer programs and watching them kind of witness the magic of technology and really ingrain in a young age the importance of equality and feminism and how we should be designing solutions always with ethics at the forefront. And then I also now on my gap semester have been consulting at a company, an early stage startup as well called Valence, which is a professional networks, and I'm leading up the Valence Funding Network, which is essentially aiming to give more Black-owned businesses access to venture capital funding. So I've been lucky that with my ventures, we've either been entirely bootstrapped, so just like been able to run based on the revenue we've generated ourselves, or getting pitch competitions and accelerator money. But I know for a lot of people, especially underrepresented entrepreneurs or those that identify as female, access to capital can be scarce, and more importantly, just access to mentorship and, you know, abilities to combat some of that imposter syndrome. So these are things I've all experienced in my life, and now having the privilege to go to a school like Harvard and to have grown up in a place like Los Angeles, I really want to be able to give back to not only younger generations, but my peers and people even older than me that are looking to start entrepreneurial projects and don't know necessarily how to get started or where to get started. So I'm not totally sure what my 5-year plan is or what my career aspirations are in the long term, but I know I always want to be working adjacent to technology, kind of at the intersection of psychology and computer science, and building tech that can have social missions and be positively impacting people's lives. So have experience, especially in like mobile apps and marketing strategies, and then in venture capital on campus, also involved in Harvard Ventures, which is our VC and startups club, and have been mentoring a lot of other student founded teams, and think that when you're in school, it's a perfect time to launch your first venture, and have learned more with these projects than I did in like 13 years of prep school, and think that really it's the best way to not only make an impact in the community, but also advance yourself personally and professionally. So really excited to be here.
Amazing. Thank you so much for that introduction. I think that gives people who are here in the audience today a little bit of insight into the long list of things that you do. And I guess that kind of leads into the first question that I wanted to ask you for today's session. And it's a really broad question that we're going to break down little by little. But I just wanted to straight up ask you at the beginning, why entrepreneurship? Like, why did you decide to take that route? You talked a little bit in your introduction about how you use it as a key to problem solving. But why the intrigue to it at the beginning? I want to know a little bit more background on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And for some context, my dad's a musician, my mom is a stay-at-home mom, and so I never necessarily had like business role models per se in my household, or even knew that being a startup founder was a career path that existed. I think when I thought startup founder, I thought Mark Zuckerberg or classic, typically male, typically white, heterosexual men in Silicon Valley, creating companies that would just blow up really quickly, and that were all about like creating revenue and creating really fast-paced tech. And I think something that I love that we talk about at the Harvard Innovation Labs a lot, which is like our incubator for student teams on campus, is that you have to be pretty crazy to be an entrepreneur. And if you come into it thinking, I want to be an entrepreneur, I want to be a founder, you're kind of already approaching it incorrectly, in the sense that it's less about wanting to be an entrepreneur or founder and more about, exactly like you said, like wanting to solve a specific problem. Because if we look at the statistics, like being a founder is like one of the worst jobs you could have. Like it's the statistically the chances of you failing are much greater than the chances of you succeeding, like from a pure like monetary perspective. And it's a lot of work and uncertainty. But if you're like passionate enough about the problem you're trying to solve, you have to have this itch in you that it's, if you don't do this, no one else is going to, and you have to do it because this problem needs to be solved and the world's going to be a better place for whatever you're creating. So I guess for me specifically, it really was, I didn't like seek this out, or necessarily when I was a senior in high school, when I created my first company, I had already been accepted into college and was just planning on using that summer to relax and like prepare for school. And I just serendipitously met my co-founder at a Girls Who Code type of award ceremony. And she approached me and said, we have to create this. LGBTQ plus teens don't have any safe spaces on the internet. And she presented me with a bunch of stats and with the story of our friend, and was like, Georgia, if we don't do this, no one else is going to do it. And we're the right people to do it because we've grown up with social media and we know how that can negatively affect people's mental health, and we know how to code, and we're not going to sell people's data or be corrupt about this. So we have to just go out and try and do it. And it seemed like a lot of fun, and I loved the team. So I just kept working on it, and I kept telling myself just a few more weeks, just a few more weeks. And now it's 2.5 years later and I haven't been able to stop.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I think something interesting that I found as I've been doing these sessions and talking to student founders both in Japan and in the US is that when you decide to be an entrepreneur, especially a young one, it's important to understand that you're either telling older people, like working individuals, that what they're doing currently is wrong and that you have a better idea, or you're trying to pioneer your own path that no one else has done, which is difficult, you know, as a young individual. But there have been two common narratives that have come out when I've asked this question. And I think yours fits into kind of the first, where someone's had this formative experience, especially in their high school or college career. And that usually comes from friends or extracurricular activities. And I think a lot of conversations in these sessions have centered around the need for education reform in Japan, because students don't really have a lot of wiggle room to explore their passions outside of just strictly studying for college entrance exams, which is a little bit different from the way we do it in the US. And another is either they have some role model who kind of paved way for them to feel comfortable enough to take that risk that you're talking about, because it is really big. But then again, being young individuals who don't have to be in the workforce yet, maybe it's a risk people should be more willing to take. And I wanted to create this series to showcase people like you who can be those role models for these students. And you listed, even in that short period of time, a bunch of activities and organizations. And I know that you are currently active in both kind of like the VC side and also the startup side. So I was hoping you could kind of walk us through everything you're doing right now and maybe explain how you think that kind of unique combined perspective you have right now informs who you are as a startup founder.
Sure, absolutely, yeah. So when I first started Trill, didn't even know what venture capital was. And in the beginning, we were in an accelerator, which was the first technically like venture-backed accelerator for high school founders. And there was tremendous pressure from investors in that accelerator. Like, you all need to raise a $3.5 million seed round within the next 2 weeks and hit 150,000 users before the new year and drop out of college and do this full time. And that was the narrative that was being presented to me. And I think because I didn't know about the venture side or the VC side of entrepreneurship, I was really misguided in the sense that no one told me you can go to school and be an entrepreneur. There's such things as side hustles or bootstrapping, or not every company needs to be worth $1 billion or have matched this sort of growth trajectory that venture capitalists want you to match. So I really like doing operating roles at startups and then also tapping into the investment world of venture capital, because I think if you are going to eventually raise money for a business or be a founder, it's important to understand how investors also think. One, so that you make sure you don't get misguided like I was, or have people selling you false narratives as to how you should grow your company, because venture capitalists have different motives than startup founders and vice versa. So just like being able to know how both worlds work, I think really inform my approach as an entrepreneur. On the VC side, I worked as a campus scout last year for Lightspeed Venture Partners, which was a really great experience. And just, I think venture capitalists have a really cool job in the sense that you just get to talk to so many talented entrepreneurs and let people take you into what their version of the future looks like. And sometimes it's crazy and you don't at all buy it and you would never invest in that. But sometimes in the like 1 in a million, it's a beautiful future that you want to invest in, and a good founder can kind of sell you on that vision. So that's why I like to do both the VC and startups, because I just think they're really connected, and all investors should know how to start a company, and everyone who wants to start a company should also know how the people that have the cash that could potentially fuel your company, how those people think and what their motives are, so that you can just protect your interest and also the interest of whatever the mission of your company is.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. I think I have a lot of friends right now, especially, because of the pandemic, who are taking time off to focus on their ventures and are feeling a lot of pressure to keep taking time off. They're like, oh, another semester, oh, another semester, and that's been turning into like a year in the future. And I also think it's really funny because I was talking to someone who's at Cardinal Ventures at Stanford, and she was talking about how she sees her role um, at Cardinal Ventures to protect students and college students from all of these outside funders who are trying to who are trying to make dropping out of college seem a lot more glorious than it might be, and how important it is for her to educate students in understanding like the risk of that, which I think is really interesting to see those common narratives across the nation as well. But I think another question that I get from a lot of student founders that you can definitely speak to is, you study psychology and computer science, and you were talking a lot about how important it is to be informed. I think a lot of students are really scared, if they don't specifically major or minor in entrepreneurship or business, that they can't launch the ideas that they have, even though we both believe that entrepreneurship is a great way to problem solve outside in any form of discipline. What do you have to say to students like that, or students who are interested but don't really know much? And how did you kind of inform yourself?
Absolutely. I think, well, for starters, Harvard doesn't offer an entrepreneurship or a business major or anything like that, and like really favors like liberal arts, like kind of generalist education over everything. So I didn't really have a choice, and if I'd had a choice, I probably would have chosen business or entrepreneurship. But in retrospect, I'm almost glad that I was like was chosen for me to do this more like liberal arts education. And I think one thing to remember is that like everyone is kind of faking it until they make it. So it will seem like everyone has it together way more than they do, or that people understand how their business operates. And like the truth of the matter is, like, no one really does. And like startup founders are really good storytellers, because they're trying to sell you on a vision for the future that is fiction, because it doesn't exist until they find product market fit. And it's really hard to find product market fit. So it's really easy to get intimidated by an entrepreneur, because that's their job, is to tell stories, which seems like it's like, oh, that's maybe false or like lying, but it's not. The best people know how to draw you into their vision of the future and believe so intensely in it that they can, sell other people on it. But at the same time, most of the time on the inside, that startup founder doesn't know if they're going to make payroll. They have 600 emails in their inbox, and the product actually doesn't work at all. So it's really just needing to recognize that, the same way we know like social media is fake and people have filters. It's now like people's LinkedIn is just as fake as their Facebook when you really think about it, and everyone is putting up fronts.
Definitely.
So I would say doesn't really matter what you study, as long as, in my opinion, if you're studying something that you love and that you think is going to optimize for what you want to achieve. So like some people maybe want to drop out of school, and if that's your path, like that's your path and you should 100% pursue it, and like that's awesome. It's not my path right now, because I really enjoy being in school, and just like for a variety of like other like family reasons and such, like it's important to me to graduate. But I've like optimized my course schedule to maximize value for my career as well. So take classes that are going to have professors that could be on the advisory board to your company, or take a class where you could meet someone who's going to be an engineer you maybe want to hire or you want to connect with. Take classes that are maybe only going to have one final, and that's all that it is, so that you don't actually have to study a lot for that class, and you can just turn in the final. I had a mentor once tell me, look at your course handbook at Harvard and like the student handbook or whatever, and figure out how you can graduate with committing the least amount of hours to your class as possible, if that's what you want to do. If you want to be able to be doing 50 hours a week to Trill, figure out how you can optimize your course schedule to only be like 10 to 15 hours a week. And it seems really intense, but if you're working backwards and if you really are committed to it, like where there's a will, there's a way. So you don't have to study business per se. It's more important to think about how are these professors, how are these relationships that's really what you're investing in college, is the people you're going to meet, the experiences you're going to get, how are those going to inform your future company that you maybe want to start, whether it's from a tangible skill building perspective or a like more soft skills perspective. And if you do that, and if you know how to read and write and talk and do basic communication skills, it's really all you need to have a business degree. And the best way to get a business degree is to just go and like work at an early stage startup, intern somewhere, email people, offer to consult, talk to as many founders as you can, and grow your own personal network. And I think that's the most powerful thing you can do.
Yeah, and I think when you were talking about that, it actually reminded me, I did a student speaker series session a little bit ago with Scuba Connect. And also we were talking about you visiting Japan. Scuba is a great place for tech people like you. And it's really interesting because they're really forward-thinking institutions. And they were talking about how a lot of the students are engineers, but the way that they bring innovation is they have these research students who are solving problems and they're like, okay, like how do we spin that into a business instead of going in purely from a business approach? So I think that completely aligns with what you're talking about and kind of how Japan is trying to transform its innovation ecosystem at the moment. Because another issue when you were talking about, optimizing your class schedule to, recognize that you're not just at college to, learn exactly what your major is, but you're there to connect, to network, to gain those soft skills. That's something that I think Japanese institutions still need to learn how to prioritize. A lot of Japanese students I was talking to explained how more focused it is on the job hunting process and how linear that process is, that it's kind of hard to break out of it and to take more unconventional steps like being a startup founder. And so a lot of people were talking about how this system change is necessary. So it's really great to hear how it worked out in your experiences. And I'm also excited to see how, through talks like this, people might recognize that and how we can create system level changes in Japan as well. I guess kind of the final question as part of this section that kind of goes off of what you were just talking about. I was wondering if you could speak to any communities that you found at Harvard that support you as a student entrepreneur that you've really gained from.
Yeah, definitely. At Harvard specifically, the Harvard Innovation Labs is a great resource. It's like an incubator for startups on campus, and also it's just like typically when we're on campus, it's a physical space that's really nice and has like whiteboards and conference rooms and like free mac and cheese and coffee and things to and open 24/7.
Yeah.
And yeah, which is great. And it's fun. You just get to meet people like in the kitchen while you're both there at 2 a.m. like making ramen or having a latte or something.
Yeah.
And you never know who you meet could be someone that you want to work with or someone that you want to like be friends with or all sorts of things. Also, Harvard Women in Computer Science and Women in Business are two organizations I'm a part of that really, we don't have like typical like Greek life social organizations. So being able to make friends my freshman year of college with other girls that were interested in business or computer science was great. And just like from a pure like, these girls would give me recommendations for classes or restaurants to eat at, where to get like the best laundry detergent or like what dry cleaners to go to, just like practical
important things.
Community building, because I went to Harvard knowing no one and didn't have any friends that I was coming in with, so really needed to like find communities to just even have people to eat lunch with and to be social with, which is really important too, to like obviously take care of yourself and surround yourself with people that uplift you and are positive and you enjoy spending time with. Harvard Ventures, which I'm biased of because it's now the club I'm president of, but that's our venture capital and startup organization. If anyone's listening, we also have a podcast for Harvard Ventures that we launched over quarantine called Bottom Line. Yeah. And we interview a lot of amazing entrepreneurs and investors and executives, and it's all students conducting the interviews. And there's a lot of great hot takes and nuggets of information in that podcast. And then beyond just Harvard, some communities that I really enjoy are like women in tech communities specifically. So I'm part of Built by Girls, Girls Who Code, the National Center for Women in Information Technology, and Rewrite the Code. And basically every engineer I've ever hired for Trill or any of my other projects has come to me through one of those organizations. And they're just incredible communities of female identifying students and graduate students that all are interested in technology. And really, I lean tremendously on all of those communities so much. And really, I don't think I would have stayed in tech if I hadn't been part of women in computer science groups, because it's not necessarily that I love software engineering per se. Like I don't necessarily get joy from coding. Like I like to code, but it's not my life's calling. But I get a lot of joy. And I think my life's calling is like collaborating and working with other people that are interested in innovative tech. And you really meet those people in these sorts of environments.
Amazing. I think that's actually a perfect segue into our second, this is actually our second question, where I wanted to ask you how you feel as a female, I guess industry, you can take it as primarily entrepreneur, like the startup scene here, but also I guess you can speak to being a woman in tech specifically and being a startup founder. And I guess also another specific question I had going off of these communities you talked about that aren't Harvard related, I'd love to hear more about how you became a part of these communities, and how maybe, I think some of them are quite large organizations. If students listening right now in Japan who want to be in the US in the future, if they can become part of these communities as well, like how you did that. Sorry, those are like big questions, but.
Yeah, no, totally. I guess just like on the practical side for like joining the communities first, I had an incredible computer science teacher in high school who encouraged me to apply for National Center on Women in Information Technology, and that's where I met my co-founder of Trill. And since then, I would just recommend like newsletters as well. Like I subscribe to a ton of like TechCrunch, Accelerated. You could just like Google like top tech newsletters or top entrepreneurship newsletters and just like even create a separate email inbox if you don't want it to spam your normal one, and just subscribe to everything. And there's always scholarships and awards and communities you can join, event series like something like this. And then also following people on Twitter is like great. Like entrepreneurs and investors are really big on Twitter as well, and they're always tweeting out things. So you could like go to my Twitter even and just like follow everyone I'm following, and then like pick your favorite writer at a blog or something and follow everyone they're following and just like stay updated. And then you're just going to start to naturally hear about these sorts of communities. Also, ask your friends, ask your mentors every time you close a meeting with a professor or your boss, ask them, is there a book you think I should read? Is there a Slack group you think I should be in? Is there, if there was one Twitter account that you would follow, if you could only follow one, what would it be? And just like get a ton of recommendations from people. And now during quarantine, it's like the best time. We're all like going on long walks and like looking for things to do, like listen to podcasts, listen to audiobooks. There's just like a ton of resources all out there on Google and whatnot if you just like curate it for yourself. Yeah. And then the kind of higher level question of how do I feel as a female identifying person in the industry? I would say I used to be a competitive debater back in like middle and high school. And I'm 20 years old, but I look fairly young, I think. And also I'm like a relatively small and like short person and just don't necessarily give like intimidating vibes if you first meet me or see me in person. And I used to go into debate tournaments, and I remember some of the boys that were older than me would like laugh at me when I first walked into the room because they thought like, oh, this is going to be such an easy win. We have to go up against this like 5'3" girl who's coming in here with her braids and her little dress, and there's no way she's going to be an intense debater. I mean, it really bothered me when I was, 13, 14 years old. I didn't know how to handle that. And my mom actually told me, she was like, that's the best thing that it could possibly be, because they're going to underestimate you, and then you're going to get up there, everyone's going to have their guard down, and they're just going to be shocked like when you speak. And I would see it happen where I would walk into rooms and I could see the way my competitors would like loosen their body language and think this is going to be an easy victory. And then 2 minutes into my debate, I was a national award-winning competitive debater. Immediately you would see their body language change like after like 3 minutes of my speech, because then they knew like, oh no, we're probably going to actually lose this debate match. And it became one of my favorite things to see how people's expectations of you would become misaligned with what you actually could do and what you were capable of. So I would say, obviously, it's unfortunate. You're going to walk into rooms sometimes as a female identifying person just in the status quo, and people will underestimate you or will make faces or sly comments at you. And you just have to think of it as like what my mom said to me when I was 13 debating. It's the best thing in the world because it's just going to make when you win or when you like metaphorically just like so much sweeter, because you're not only going to be surprising people, but you're going to be paving the way forward in terms of changing people's expectations. And unfortunately, this is the work we have to do. And lots of amazing women have come before us and like put in work, but there's still a ton to be done. So if anything, just use how people underestimate you to your advantage to just prove them so wrong. And don't take that as a burden. Take it as like a really fun opportunity. I always think it's a fun challenge to surprise people and change what they would expect based on your appearance.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. I really love that anecdote that you gave. I could really imagine it in my head, you know? And I was wondering, have you encountered similar experiences kind of that you had when you were debating in, for example, when you were talking to funders or when maybe you were talking to peers who are like male identifying?
Yeah, I mean, I get a lot of like from older men in particular with my social network, things like, oh, like my daughter would love this, or I'll have to be sure to ask my daughter about this, or someone else could use this. Sometimes I'll send people pitch decks where it will say like, there'll be like an 80K to be like, we have 80,000 users, and people will be like, oh, like I saw you have 800 users, like that's super impressive, like congratulations. Like, no, there's 80,000 users,
Yeah.
not 800. So people just misreading decks, but in a way that feels intentional. Maybe it's not, but something about it does. Also had a lot of amazing female mentors and role models. I've been really lucky, but some of those female mentors and role models have had to give me advice that I wish they didn't have to give me, with things like, if you're working with a male colleague, you should just lie and say you have a boyfriend. Like always lie and just say that you're in a relationship or something like that, because otherwise you're going to get unwanted sexual advances. And luckily I've never encountered anything so explicit, but the fact that even like multiple female mentors have given me the same piece of advice, I think is really telling to some unfortunate workplace things females have. I think it's also like in terms of dress code, like I'm really lucky in tech.
Yeah.
I worked in like the summer heat of Minneapolis in my most formal office setting, and I would come in a sundress and sneakers. But I know sometimes women are subjected to crazy dress codes, even in the heat. When you're walking to work, you need to still be in heels or in clothes that just aren't comfortable. So I'm lucky that I haven't encountered a ton of that, but I know it still exists, of course.
Yeah, no, definitely. I was working with kind of this female-based innovation community in Silicon Valley, and they were saying the exact same thing. And it's really sad to see the small statistics of, you know, the number of female directed startups that get funding is so low, and it even gets lower for women of color and things like that. And I was quite disappointed in that. And then I actually have been talking to some female founders in Japan who have been trying to tackle this idea of gender inequality, and have had people straight up tell them, like, I'm not going to fund that. Like, I'm not going to put my money into something silly like gender inequality. Like, that's always going to exist. Just kind of suck it up. And what you're doing doesn't make sense. And so I think they told me that they've had to develop a thicker skin because of that. And it's sad to see that kind of take on social entrepreneurship be shot down. Yeah. And I was wondering, oh, sorry, were you trying to say something?
No, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, yeah. Do you have, especially in these communities with other female identifying entrepreneurs, do you see some like common characteristics of female entrepreneurs that maybe people can not like work on, but kind of, if there's this common thread that you see?
Yeah, I think something also that we teach the elementary school girls in my coding camp that's really important, but it's like a lesson for everyone, is essentially girls have been, or female identifying people have historically been socialized to perfection, where male identifying people have been socialized towards bravery. So you see this from like a very early age, where you look at statistics of who applies for jobs when there's like criteria listed for a job. I forget the exact statistic, but it's something like men will apply for the job if they meet 45% of the criteria. because boys growing up are conditioned to be brave, like, jump off that playground set, go and tackle someone in this competitive game of sport. You should always try to one-up yourself and like level up and put yourself out there and be competitive and brave and strong. That's what a male stereotypically is supposed to do.
Mm-hmm.
So that translates really toxic in the workplace, because then you'll get male identifying people applying for these jobs that they're actually underqualified for, but they're faking it till they make it, so to speak, so effectively that they still will receive that job. Whereas females will only apply for a job if they meet 100% of the criteria, because girls are taught to not take up too much space and to be more quiet, and to make sure that they're always doing everything in a very clean and pristine way. So I think that would be the biggest thing that females have to change in terms of how we've been socialized. And it's obviously not just the work that females need to do, it's also work that male identifying people and people of all gender identities need to be doing, in terms of how do we raise people and condition young people, because this really does get formulated in you at an extremely young age, determine their value in society. And it's just a crazy thing that men are taught to overestimate their abilities and women are taught to underestimate their abilities. And that creates this really big gap that we see in terms of the types of careers women and men are getting, even the pay gap, and then obviously the amount of female-founded startups that are getting funded. And they've also done studies, and I could try to find the article and send it. It's where the types of questions investors are asking female entrepreneurs are often questions to prove something. So rather than being like, tell us about your growth metrics, it'll be where a male will get asked a question like, tell us about why your growth metrics are so high. Woman will get a question being like, tell us about how your growth metrics can be higher, even if you have the exact same metrics for like download count or something for a mobile app. So even the types of questions women are getting asked in these investment meetings are different than the type men are getting asked. So also for female entrepreneurs, something you can do before investment meetings is make a list of types of questions that you want to answer and then answer those questions. So reframe questions that people are asking you to always position yourself to be from a place of strength and a place of overestimating your abilities instead of underestimating them. Because everyone is, as we know, like people of all gender identities are completely equal and capable, but unfortunately we're not taught to believe that always, and you really can internalize that, especially when it comes from us and messaging from such a young age.
Definitely. And I think these are, hard topics to talk about, but it's really important to understand these trends, especially as we start and continue to build innovation ecosystems in Japan. If we're not noticing mistakes that are being made, like, let's build it in a way that doesn't include them. And I also just read a study in my psych class about, we were talking about representation and research, and it was talking about the importance of diversity in innovation, because it's those marginalized ideas that when we bring to the forefront actually help with problem solving, and they give the creative solutions that no one's thinking about. So it's really important to, have everyone's voices heard. So I completely agree with you on that. And I guess as we talk about like diversity and kind of like this global mindset, I kind of wanted to ask what your experience has been with global entrepreneurs, maybe in some of the external organizations you've been in.
Yeah. So I don't have a ton of experience in terms of global entrepreneurship, but something that is really cool with my Women in Business organization is we got to all travel together to Shanghai in China over last winter break, which was really great to get to see how that in a different country, in different city, the way business was approached. And we met a ton of really exceptional startup founders there. And I think the main thing was just maybe like a disconnect between those entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs in America at Harvard per se, like it's just like one example. And I think that's like something really cool about the pandemic, if there's any good outcomes of this, is the fact that even conversations like this can start to happen on Zoom. In our podcast, actually, for Harvard Ventures Sneak Preview, we just interviewed Alex Kayal, who leads up the Salesforce Ventures international investment strategy. And he was even just saying, he mostly focuses on the US and Europe, but even just with that, Silicon Valley typical investors are now putting way more cash into Europe and into other areas, because now it's not like you have to come to San Francisco to do a pitch meeting, because no one's doing that. Everyone is doing their pitch meetings on Zoom. So hopefully there's potential for more entrepreneurs to get to meet each other. I wish it was something that was in an organization that had a more global approach, because a lot of the entrepreneurs I'm meeting are based in America, and I think it would be really worthwhile to get to connect with more entrepreneurs internationally.
Well, yeah, amazing. Well, now you're part of this community as well, and we have locations all around the world, so that's great for you, I guess. And yeah, kind of, I know we're getting closer to the end for the time of this session, so I just wanted to also talk a little bit about going off of that, how right now at Venture Cafe Tokyo, you talked about the silver lining of COVID being that, you know, we can interact with people from all across the globe. We are able to connect with organizations like JWLI that are based in Boston and are supporting Japanese female entrepreneurs. And we get people from the US and Japan talking about their experiences and specifically like navigating cross-cultural differences and how they can use that to their advantage, which I think is really interesting. You know, or even my first session actually had students from the US talking to Japanese students about their experiences. And I think those connections that are being made are really important, especially at Venture Cafe. We talk a lot about the growing innovation ecosystem in Japan and how we can learn, you know, from the good and the bad all around the world. And I hope that those connections keep happening. But I also know that we only have 10 minutes left. So I wanted to open the floor for Q&A if anybody in the audience has questions that they want to ask Georgia about any of the three questions that we've mainly focused on today, or specifics about her experiences. You can drop it in the chat below. And while we're waiting for those questions to come in, Georgia, I was wondering if you could kind of broadly give any students or female identifying individuals advice that you have for them, or better yet, even male identifying individuals who are in this industry about how they can be allies, or grown-ups who want to support younger individuals as well. A wider range, you can take whichever perspective you want.
Yeah, totally. I think just like general advice for everyone would be, one of the best pieces of advice I received early on in my career was to balance long-term vision with short-term executions. So to think about what is your long-term vision for yourself personally, professionally. I like to do a lot of goal setting, especially setting goals for mind, body, and soul, and like separate those out into different categories and what do those look like for your overall well-being, and like remembering that you're a person as well that needs self-care and to prioritize your mental health. But essentially, like in short, with long-term vision is you have all these grand goals, but that seems really scary, and you can't necessarily accomplish like a grand goal in one day. So balancing that with then short-term little executions you can do on a day-by-day basis to achieve that vision. And then when you set your long-term vision, don't meditate on it too much. Like maybe let yourself, like at the start of every month, reevaluate that, or the start of every semester, or whatever it looks like in your schedule. And then once you determine that, focus on the short-term executions and actually just get to work, because there's lots of work to be done for people of all gender identities to better improve equality and entrepreneurship and diversity in the field. So the most important thing you can do is just start checking things off the to-do list, and remember that you're working towards that long-term vision, but it's going to take a bunch of baby steps, and it takes a lot of time and patience.
Yeah, I think that's especially really important because kind of unlike school, you know, being an entrepreneur, no one's checking in on you to make sure that you're completing the tasks you do. So it's a lot of self-motivation. And I guess that kind of leads into the question that we got from Lisa. What is your motivation to drive, and how do you keep the motivation to work towards your future? Maybe you kind of answered that. Is there anything additional that you want to speak to, or?
Yeah, I think it's just Well, like very tangibly with like Trill, for example, my motivation is definitely my users. There's actual people using the app that are giving me feedback on a daily basis. And it's really important to me that those users are being well taken care of, and designing always with the people that we're serving and we're creating this product for at the forefront. I think at like a more meta or high level, like family is super important to me. My mom and dad are both immigrants to America and have worked really hard to like give me these privileges. And I definitely try not to take that for granted and really just do want to be making sure that I'm not only doing my parents proud, but also and then hopefully creating new opportunities for future generations. Because it's a unique amount of privilege, and I feel really blessed to like be given the education and career opportunities I've been given, because I know not everyone is as lucky. So with that, I think it's just important to just work really hard. And I love the work I do. So also it's all fun work to do.
Yeah, I definitely think when we talked about using entrepreneurship as problem solving, it goes into this idea of social innovation and social entrepreneurship. And in doing that kind of work, it's really important to reflect on where you fit in that context in regards to your privilege. So definitely props to you for recognizing that and taking that into account. Talk asks, you touched upon the serendipitous collisions while eating mac and cheese, etc. Are there certain types of mentors that would be more helpful than others from a more general or broad perspective? As for you, maybe more tech oriented and such.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely the serendipitous collisions I love, and I think that's how you make like some of the best connections. Mentorship is kind of a weird one because, like you were saying, there's no like mentors don't have any obligation to you per se, and like no one is telling you that you need to work with these people or that these people should mentor you, and there's not like a handbook for how to make the most of mentors.
Mm-hmm.
I think something that's important for me is to separate like mentors that are mentors to me as a person and then mentors that are mentors to like my different businesses, because those people sometimes can have different motivations, especially when you get into advisory boards where you're maybe giving like equity or like some sort of compensation to mentors. So I do try to keep a few mentors that are like not necessarily invested in any of my businesses, but are more just invested in me as a person, and like that I can be more upfront with sometimes about like different struggles or like pivots that I want to make. And then yes, like getting mentors that are really niche. So like for Trill, for example, we have mentors that are experts on suicide prevention or experts on different mental health topics, because that's what we're doing there. Whereas for my girls coding camp, we have mentors that are like principals at elementary schools and things like that. So finding people that are niche. And then also I think it's really important to like show gratitude to your mentors, and to do what you can to give back to those that are like giving you their time. So like if any of my companies were to one day sell for like a big sum of money, like there's a group of people that I know immediately, even if they don't have equity right now per se in the business, that I would immediately write advisor equity grants out to, and it just would be like not even a second thought would be given to that. So just like always remember the people that are helping you early on, and like keep a list if you need to keep a list, and then be sure whether it's in the form of, not everyone, it doesn't have to be, you know, you sell a business for a lot of money and you give equity to those people. It could be you have a mentor that needs to hire someone and you help post flyers around campus, or you send something on an email list, or they have a product that they want you to tinker with, or they need you to sit on a Zoom call or a panel or something, and just always being really open to give back to your mentors too.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you so much for that insight. I think those are most of the questions. Again, if anyone has any lingering thoughts or questions, you can use the QR code on our backgrounds for any follow-up if you would like. Georgia, if you have any last thoughts, you can share them now. If not, I will pass it on to Kelsey for the closing remarks from the US Embassy side.
Oh, yeah. Thank you so much for having me. And yes, please feel free to scan my QR code or Google me, and I would be happy to talk to anyone or do any follow-ups. Really appreciate the time.
Amazing. Okay, so I'm going to pass it on to Kelsey for a few minutes.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Solana. And thank you so much, Georgia. We're so glad that both of you could join us from the US today, and for sharing, of course, your personal experiences and advice for all of us. I think it doesn't matter your age or background. I think it's all useful. So thanks for sharing your experiences. Before we close today, we'd like to invite you to take a quick event survey. So you'll see the QR code pop up on your screen. And we will share the link in the chat as well. Also, since it is Global Entrepreneurship Week and International Education Week, we'd like to invite you to join us for other programs we're hosting. So please follow us on our social media or visit our website for further information. So thank you all so much again. I'll turn it back to Solana to close us out.
Yeah, and talking about events, I think one of the last student speaker series session that I will host will be roughly about a month from now, December 10th. And we will be in partnership with Temple University in Japan. And we're going to talk about redefining what it means to be a student, as we'll have panelists who are EMBA students and a little bit older, and focus more on this idea of being an entrepreneur means lifelong learning. Kind of like Georgia and I talked today, you know, it's not just about what you learn in school, but a lot of the soft skills and a lot of stuff that you need to learn even after college. So that's what we will be focusing on. But yes, right before I end, I just wanted to thank Georgia and Kelsey, and of course Venture Cafe Tokyo for having me and for allowing me to do this session. It was really great to talk about all these topics that are also near and dear to my heart. And I hope that maybe anybody in the audience is able to take away the key, you know, messages and importance of supporting diversity as we build innovation ecosystems around the world. Thank you.
Solana, thank you so much for hosting. Great job. And Georgia, it was really inspiring to hear you talk. I had a lot of comments on the back end through my cell phone over here that people are really happy to hear your story and really want to, I guess, support you, although we're kind of separated by an ocean over here, here in Tokyo. But soon enough, hopefully, you know, we can do something together, and you guys can visit in Tokyo as well. But for the rest of you guys who are around, feel free. I think, you know, it's very late over in the United States, so we don't want to keep them too much. But if you guys have any last minute questions, please feel free to use the chat, or you can unmute yourself and do so over here as well. And in the meantime, we do have other sessions for those of you in Tokyo who are going to stay up late with us, whether it's on impact investments, or we have some pitches from both Europe and the United States, as Georgia messaged or talked about earlier, connecting with people from all around the world, especially as Kelsey also mentions Global Entrepreneurship Week this week as well. So we got a packed evening ahead of us. And thank you to all the speakers who joined us from the United States. Getting ready to sleep soon in -1 degree weather. Was it, Solana? It's really cold over in Boston. Stay warm. And then, yeah, so I don't want to take too much of your time. If anyone has any last minute questions, feel free to ask them right now. If not, then thank you again to everyone who participated.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Georgia, is the best way to connect with you on like LinkedIn and stuff like that? Is that you said looking me up on Google earlier, but is LinkedIn probably good?
LinkedIn is great. I think the QR code should go to it. And also I just dropped my email in the chat too, if anyone wants to reach out there.
Perfect. Do you have any plans on coming to Japan?
I'd love to, as soon as we're able to travel again, hopefully safely.
Kelsey might have an answer to that, right? You know, any movements coming up?
We're all waiting.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Everyone, please take care and stay healthy.
I think that's a great message to end on. We hope everyone stays healthy, and we hope to see you guys all soon. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Takumi, お疲れ様。
お疲れ様です。これ YouTube、これ一回切るん